You know when you have like a campaign and everybody comes in with like silly joke characters, but then by the end, everybody is like in real tears. Nothing like gets me more than that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dice Exploder. Each week we take a tabletop mechanic and shine a spotlight on it. My name is Sam Dunewald, and my co-host today is Moira Joy Smith. So for my day job, I'm a video editor, and in 2024, I spent most of the year editing for the Try Guys. If you're not familiar, they're former BuzzFeed producers turned YouTube comedians who do a lot of food-related videos, some comedy game shows. You get the idea. They got 8 million subscribers, and as of spring 2024, their own streaming platform. They're great. A few months into freelancing for the guys, I learned that they were planning a Dungeons & Dragons actual play. Like a bunch of improv comedian friends doing some goofs kind of show. And obviously, I had to get in on that. So I did. As of this recording, the Try Guys has run for about 11 episodes across 2 seasons and a Christmas special. And I thought, as I gear up for a Dice Exploder miniseries on actual play this fall, that it'd be fun to first check in on where I'm coming from with actual play and how the Try Guys got made. To do that, there was only one person I could possibly have on the show, Moira Joy Smith, the Try Guys Dungeon Master and in-house video editor for the Try Guys. MJ and I worked together really closely to make this show happen, and honestly, it's her show. She's at the top, she set the tone, and frankly, I think she kicked ass at it. And we were thorough in this episode. You may have noted the runtime on this chonker. It is officially the longest episode of Dice Exploder yet. We start with a bunch of background, like how shows get made for YouTube at large, how the Try Guys specifically make shows, and how this show came about. But we get all the way granular down to how I made choices in the edit about whether to leave in or cut individual jokes, how rolling dice works on camera. If you're interested in watching the actual play before listening to this, Season 1, Episode 1 of the Try Guys is on YouTube now, and there's a link in the show notes. The rest of the series is available at secondtry.tv, that's 2ndtry.tv. I recommend starting with Season 2, which is primarily what MJ and I talk about on this episode. Thanks to everyone who supports Dice Exploder on Patreon, and with all that, here is Moira Joy Smith with Rolling the Dice on Camera and the Try Guys. MJ, thanks so much for being on Dice Exploder.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
It's such a pleasure.
It is.
We made so much D&D actual play last year, and I am really excited. I feel like we have really needed just professionally to sit down and do like a post-mortem on like how did it go.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to get to do that on camera here. And we are in the Try Guys podcast studio right now. This is a first for me to like be in a podcast studio for this.
I did break us in over the weekend.
Yeah.
Nobody besides the podcast studio, like, owner knows that I'm here.
Don't tell the Try Guys
Zach.
that we are stealing their equipment.
They're away right now, and they don't know that I'm doing this.
Exactly. So, yeah, who are the Try Guys? Who are these people we're talking about? What's going on here?
So, the Try Guys, they were a crew of guys from BuzzFeed way back, and the current 2 Try Guy members are Zach and Keith, and the extended Try cast are 10 other people that... not that we don't care about them, but I'm not going to name all of them.
Yes.
Zach and Keith are the owners of Second Try LLC, and they're the ones that I answer to every day of my life.
Yeah. So you're an assistant editor here.
No.
Oh?
I'm a post-production coordinator now.
Coordinator. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Congratulations on the promotion,
Thank you.
It sounds like. And I spent most of 2024 making my primary income being a freelance editor for y'all. Mm-hmm. And about halfway through the year, it sounds like you had about a year-long quest to get like a D&D actual play made by this company.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to hear like from you, like what was the journey like initially conceiving of this project and like to getting on camera for the first time back in July or whenever it was.
Yeah. I guess this all started because I wanted more practice being a DM.
Sure.
I wouldn't call myself a novice, but I would say like not advanced.
Yeah.
I was like dipping my toe in as like the rules master, whereas prior I'd only been a player.
And when did how long have you been playing D&D?
I feel like I did a little bit in high school, took a big break, but that was about the time I discovered listening to them and like finding shows where I could enjoy other people playing.
Yeah, and what kind of shows were you listening to?
I was introduced first to Critical Role, which I immediately dropped. I loved it very much, but I couldn't stay consistent, and that's one of the things that I struggle with in like the conception of this show. And then when I couldn't keep up with Critical Role, I ended up finding the Adventure Zone. That was the next one. And the Adventure Zone, I listened to the entire way through. I remember summers when I was lifeguarding, and they let me keep super not safe. Let me keep one earbud in, and I was listening to the ending of the show, and thankfully it was kind of a rainyish day, and nobody was there, and I was just sobbing in my lifeguard tower, crying. Completely inconsolable because of the beautiful ending. It was so good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so then at some point you got hired at the Try Guys.
Right, yeah.
And you were getting back into playing D&D, presumably with friends and stuff.
Right.
And,
so I got into the Try Guys, and I had been listening to more tabletop games, and I was just like, man, all of my friends are out here now, and we're all getting back into doing things together. Let's all play a tabletop game. And so I started playing here and there with them one-shots, but I was never running them. And I was just like, we're doing it so sporadically. I want to do it. I want to do something consistent, or at least get my practice in. So I pitched it in my work Slack. I pitched it to people at the office, and I was like, does anybody here want to play D&D? And I was able to convince 4 people to do it, and we all this was another instance of me breaking into the office without telling anybody.
Yeah.
I have keys, by the way. I have keys. It's not breaking in because I have keys. So I came into the office over the weekend and tried to host a one-shot that turned into a 3-parter. And interestingly enough, I hadn't told anybody that I was going to be there, like I said, and on the first day we were playing, Keith showed up. Keith was was grabbing something at the office, and he was like, is somebody here? And he found us in the conference room playing, and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm hosting a D&D game. Nobody said I couldn't. So he showed up, was like, okay, you kids have fun, and left. But I think from him seeing that was where the first dialogue opened up for us to maybe have a show about.
Yeah, and then my understanding is it took you about a year to get on camera.
Pretty much.
Of production delays and stuff.
Yeah, it was. So the story is that I did that show, or that I did my one shot.
Yeah.
Nothing came of it because it was just friends hanging out.
Playing with your coworkers in the office.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And I was like, well, I'll never get a show out of this. I'm still trying to get my footing at a relatively new job. So I hadn't been doing any pitching or anything. And one day, maybe 5 months after the one shot had happened, I was hanging out in the kitchen, and Keith walked up to me completely unprompted and was like, if you want to do a D&D game for Patreon, we could just do that. That's greenlit. And I was like,
the dream.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I was not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. So I was like, a gift Keith in the mouth?
No. A gift D&D game in the mouth.
Exactly. And I was like, you got it, boss, and started writing immediately. And then I had something ready maybe a month or 2 later, because I'm doing this on top of my regular job. And then it kept changing in scope and scale.
Yeah.
So it originally was just going to be a couple of us from the staff for Patreon, and it wasn't going to be anything bigger than that. But Zach and Keith approached me, and they were like, well, I kind of want to play. And I was like, okay, sure, that's fine. But now we have to schedule with you guys in mind, and they have a much bigger schedule.
They sure do.
And then we kept delaying because trying to get 4 people together.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, so, when this comes out on our second channel. And I was like, I thought this was just going on Patreon. And they were like, yeah, but we're in and out, so it can be on our second channel. I was like, okay, hang on, I have to do some rewrites, and I have to fix some things, and if we're gonna be, so we're filming it now, so I have to do and it just kept growing to become bigger and bigger until it ended up on our streamer, which hadn't even been announced internally when the D&D game was being talked about.
Yeah, it feels to me pretty typical of how, I'll say digital media productions work at large.
Sure.
I used to work at The Onion, and it used to be very similar there too, of someone has an idea and it just like grows a little bit because they're passionate about it or like someone's championing it, and suddenly it's like gone from like a thing you were going to bang out in an afternoon into something that is like a year in the making, and like like the scale is always thrown around, and like then we did it, and like, are we going to do more? It was like it went pretty well. Are we going to do more? Well, maybe not. Maybe. Yeah. And then 2 years ago, suddenly we're going to do 6 more of them. Or, like it's just always a chaotic schedule.
That is so literally what is happening to Die Guys as we speak.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because on one hand, that's so... Like, the only way the way I imagine it is like, wow, that's the American dream, right? Like, it's you're able to come in with this idea and it has the capacity to grow and be whatever you want it to be. But the reality and the downside is that it's actually because nobody knows what they're doing. It's actually because in digital media, like you said, specifically in digital media, anything could be big, anything could like catch a wave of virality and like be worthwhile, but it's so hard to predict that they're throwing their eggs in as many baskets as humanly possible. And it makes production particularly incredibly difficult to like conceptualize and conceive of and execute. So it's anyway, and it's fascinating.
I think it's also really interesting, and the reason that I wanted to bring in all this context is because I think it's really interesting to put that context in contrast to most people making actual play. Because I think most people making actual play are like starting from the point of, it's the pandemic, I've got my friends, we've got a Twitch channel, let's get on there and we'll like become famous doing actual play. And like, that hasn't really worked out for most people. Like, but a lot of people, it has worked out for a lot of like people having 30 viewers and like a fun time just streaming their weekly D&D game, And there are people who are trying to do that are still trying to get famous that way. And maybe we'll start to see success there eventually because, it's only been a couple of years here since this sort of big wave of people coming in on the pandemic. But on the other, like the Die Guys and the Try Guys are like coming from this other side of it of already having a lot of success, a lot of fame in the kind of YouTube world, and like looking for any kind of adjacent medium or content or like kind of video to explore and to make. I remember talking with Will, the post supervisor, who was talking about how the Die Guys seemed like a really natural fit here because relative to the kind of video that y'all are often making, it's pretty cheap and easy to produce. And that is an insane thing to say to a lot of the people who are going to be my regular listeners who like are trying to make actual play, or like, people from that community trying to make actual play. If they heard how much I was making on this show, I mean, I got paid $5.50 a day to edit this show. Like, it was my full-time job to edit this show, and like I was like one of 12 people working on the show or something, right? And so that's the scale at the starting point is so unique, I feel like, for Die Guys relative to the actual play scene. Yeah,
I would agree. It is, I think the way that they're viewing it is almost a podcast or almost a hangout. And it is like way chiller for them than our regular shoots. Like it is. I wish I knew how to explain it. It's kind of, when I think of the scale of our other productions, and I think about like all that goes into them, the large cast and crews. Without a Recipe is a great contrast.
Yeah. So actually, this is the next thing I wanted to talk about. Please. So let's like get into this formally. Like, tell me about how many people are working on a Without a Recipe shoot, and pitch me what Without a Recipe is, and then let's go and talk about what the Die Guys like set looked like by comparison.
Sure. So one of the bigger shows on the Try Guys, this is probably our like main hitter on YouTube, are the Without a Recipe series.
Yeah.
And it's basically the guys and also the extended cast coming into the kitchen and competing on making a dish, but with no recipe.
Yeah, like there's one that's like making Girl Scout cookies without a recipe.
Right, making Girl Scout cookies, making macarons, making bagels was one of the first ones. Without a Recipe is like our big thing though, and it takes a very large group of people in pre-production to do a lot of the coordinating for like, because we'll have real chefs on it who are our judges, and that takes people to coordinate and scout. And then we have people who are getting all the ingredients. I'm trying, like, if I'm visualizing it, I think we're talking like a crew of at least 30.
Yeah, because you've got 3-4 cameras going at a time.
Yeah.
You've got at least one sound person. You've got like a head producer, but also like PAs are going to be around. Yeah. You've got the 2 chef judges. You've got at least 2 like talents.
Yeah.
I haven't edited without a recipe, but some editor's going to come in.
I'm included with DIT, and then there's the syncing and the post-production.
Someone's going to be coloring and mixing, and that's not going to be the primary editor. Right. You've got Will, who's coordinating post-production. Like, it's a whole company.
It's
like,
large.
This is what the company does.
Yeah. And not to throw some shade, you can cut this out if you want to, but nothing bothers me more than people on our Reddit, and it's terrible that I look at Reddit. I already know that I shouldn't, but there are so many people who think that the Try Guys is still just kind of like Zach and Keith and like, an editor and a sound guy.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much larger than that, and production is so much larger than that. And so it's fascinating to know it from the inside of like, these, when you release 2 videos a week, which is basically what we do, we're like a pretty large production company in the YouTube space.
Like, I remember when there was all the controversy around The Watcher was coming out with their original streaming platform. They were talking about leaving YouTube, and one of the big things that people were mad about was this idea of like, The Watcher was pitching, we want to bring you like TV quality shows, and people were like, we don't care about those, we just want to like watch y'all hang out, basically. Like, we don't need all these bells and whistles and so forth. And I think that there is some truth to the idea that like you can be lower fi. Like, I think like people in the production often, we want to make things better. We want the highest possible quality. Yeah. Like, I do take the time to remove all the ums and ahs from Dice Exploder because I think that creates a better product.
Yep.
And like, there are people who tell me, I have friends who tell me just like, I want the 90-minute cut, man. Like, I don't care. Just like put it, I just want to hang out.
Yeah.
And like, I think that is valid, but I think that people also, like fans, often don't understand how much even just the turn on a camera and hang out stuff takes in terms of production quality.
No, absolutely.
Especially when you're talking about a show like Without a Recipe that involves a whole fucking kitchen. Like,
The beauty of editing, the one thing that attracted me to editing back in the day, because that's like what I went to school for. A good editor is invisible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's why these hangout shows are heavily edited. You just can't really see it. And that's what makes so many of these shows really work and be fluid and be like a good pace. You feel like it's natural because the editor designed it to be that way. And I just like that very much.
Yeah, I just want to like call out that I believe probably we are about 12, 13 minutes into the runtime of this episode right now, including my like 2-minute intro.
Yeah,
and we've been recording for 40 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. So that's what Without a Recipe looks like.
Right.
So what does Die Guys look like?
So after our first ragtag season, the improvements that we got for the second season were having a real producer. That wasn't me. And Noelle did a lot of amazing work that helped us build it into a more official show, completely. So we had me still working on the story, and you did touching base. And then Noelle helped me. I was like the touch point for a lot of things. People would ask my opinion, which that was cool.
You are the point person for Die Guys.
Pretty much.
It's your show.
And I love that. Yeah. I love that that's something that I get to even do. I literally didn't think that it would become this, so I am thrilled, and it's been a blast. But so Noelle would she would be the one who would create these documents for me to look at about like, I think set should look like this. And I would be like, yeah. And I would give my notes. And she would then touch base with our production designer. And
who was doing all the like sets and that
stuff.
Kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Like season 1, I bought tablecloths off of Amazon. And that was the set. So just having those two people already made it feel a lot more official.
Totally.
And then we had Jack and Armando doing a lot of our tech work, where I would be like, I want the cameras here, and they would do that. And that was pretty... So I would say that, like, besides you and I, we're looking at, like, an additional crew of maybe 5 people. And then a bunch of people would sit in because it was a fun show to watch.
Yeah. And then of course, we have 4 on-camera talent players. So that's Zach, Keith, and...
Joyce and Miles.
Yeah. And then me, of course. And I would say I was, like, touching base with you to, like, have an hour long...
You were sort of my support animal.
Yeah, totally. But, like, I'm there to, like, talk for an hour just, like, through what the plan is while I'm dropping off a hard drive on another project or something. I'm the editor, and we know that in advance. And I remember, like, showing up to set and Noelle and, like, Zach basically saying to me, hey, you can just be director too, man. Like, just, like, get in there and tell us what you need in post.
So helpful. Truly nothing is more helpful than having the editor who already has not a vision, but kind of, like, is watching it with a critical eye and being able to be like, this is going to be funny. Let's have them clean it up a little bit.
Yeah. Like, for example, in the conversation that we have just been having, you were talking about Noelle, the producer, and I cut out of the edit a moment when I asked you, what was her name again? And you were like, oh, it was Noelle. And I was like, great. And then I set you back up. I, like, repeated the sentence that I had said to get you into that. And then you came back and explained with her name.
And what's hilarious is that you've cut that part out and now put it back in by describing it.
Exactly. Well, but, like, that's the kind of thing. It is funny. That's the kind of thing where I think everyone really likes having that on set. Just someone who's, like, job it is on set to be there and be like, oh, I'm going to need you to just say this sentence into the camera, Zach, please, so that I can cut these two things together where we had 60 seconds in the middle of someone asking a rules question that doesn't matter. Or, like, maybe we want to leave in the rules question, but we want to, like, get rid of this whole, like, deranged bit that someone did that, like, isn't actually that funny or, like, whatever the thing is. So I was doing a combination of that, of, like, thinking ahead to the edit and of being a rules support person for y'all. So when there were rules questions, I could, like, be the person who has the books and y'all can just, like, focus on being funny.
And I'll say this. I noticed in my watch through that I fucked up like 2 times, and it's perfectly fine. Yeah, on the rules.
Yeah,
and
who cares?
Perfectly fine. Nobody, like, who the fuck cares? I don't care.
Yeah.
But, like, it is so funny to me. This doesn't have to make it in. This is just a personal anecdote. It's just like, I know that intimidation is a wisdom saving throw, and I'll never forget it now. But I did a strength saving throw, and I'm so angry about it.
Oh yeah, that was funny. But you can just, like, call for that. Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever.
I'll say by the end of it, at the beginning, I definitely felt far more nervous about the rules. And by the end of it, I was like, I don't know, this.
Well, we're going to get into that in a minute. I want to finish this up first. So the last piece then I wanted to set up was how long it took us to shoot, right? So the whole thing was 5 episodes long plus a little debrief at the end, like a 20, 30 minute, like, you know, how do we feel about how that went? Stars and wishes kind of thing.
It was cute.
It was cute. And each episode was around an hour, except for there's one that's 2 hours. So it's about like 6 hours worth of playing. And originally, and we shot over 2 days, right? So the original intention was like, we're going to do episode 1 is before lunch or, like, you know, a little past lunch on day 1. And then we'll have episode 2 in the back half of the day. And then we, like, take a break for 5 days, come back and do the thing.
Which, by the way, they weren't going to let me take days in between. I had to, like, specifically, they tried to be like, so let's do it on Thursday and Friday. And I was like, I cannot talk for that long. I need a weekend in between, please.
You would have been fine.
I would have been. You don't understand. I think I covered it pretty well, and I don't remember if I mentioned this to you, but during the scene where Ingrel is, like, telling them exposition, I had a complete out-of-body experience. I forgot I was there. I just, like, slipped out of my own head, and I'm like, wow, I'm thinking about this as I'm talking in a terrible accent. And then I come back into my head, and I was like, I have got to focus. So can you imagine 2 days of just that?
I mean, but you were a lot more comfortable with it by the end.
That's
true.
I think I was tired.
It's really hard to convey just how different it feels to like be there under the lights. Like when because you put me on camera for this like debrief thing at the end, and I was like, yeah, I've been on camera. I like host Dice Exploder. I'm gonna just show up and do the thing. And I got there and was like, huh! These lights. These people seem so far away because of like we're sitting in weird places for the camera angles and stuff. Like it all just does not feel. It's not like sitting around your couch. It's sitting around a film set. Yeah. And that feels different.
It does feel very different.
I do want to come back to that idea too, though. But
finish that thought
another pin. We're putting pins in everything. But like, so we did 2 shoot days. And another interesting thing that I think I did as editor was identify pretty early on in the first day that we were probably going to be able to get more than 4 episodes out of it.
Yeah.
So we started like adjusting for that and ended up with 5, and that was cool. And that was it. Like then we made the thing. We did post-production. Post-production took me probably 6 days an episode or something like that to cut these things.
Footage.
And then you're doing color and mix, and now it's up on the channel and anyone can go and watch it. And like that was the process behind making the thing. Now we are in the trying to publicize the existence of this thing phase.
Right.
I think both of us would really love for there to be more of this.
I would love it.
And I feel like there's a really strong chance that there will be more of this, and it's sort of a question of whether it'll take 2 years for them to remember that they want to do more, or whether it'll take them a couple of weeks. But we'll see.
I'm like this close to like getting on my Instagram and just begging people like, please watch my show, please watch my like I don't want to be desperate, but I'm like, it was so fun. And the thing is, Zach and Keith and everybody.
We had a great time.
Everybody had a blast.
It was really interesting, especially like I think people had fun with the first season. I think we had fun with the holiday special.
Right.
But coming off that second season, it felt like we finally know how to do this.
Yeah. We ironed it out.
Yeah, and everyone had a great time. And I've not always been the biggest fan of actual play personally. Sure. It has never really been exactly the medium for me. And I think that goes back to how I feel about like improv, because that's what this kind of show is. Actual play can be so many different things. It can be so many different things. And I think next week's episode probably is going to be with Ken Lowry about this game, Void 1680 AM, which is a solo RPG in which you make a playlist. You're a radio DJ, and you make a playlist, and then you use a deck of cards to like randomly generate a caller who calls in with some problem.
Very cool, actually.
It's very cool. Yeah. And you like are supposed to record yourself as the DJ, like between sets, like as you're doing the thing.
That's so neat. Oh, okay, I really like this.
Yeah, and then when you're done, you have like I have a couple of these, right? Yeah. Of like it's you, and then it's your Spotify playlist, so that it's back to you, and you have the thing, and you have the thing, and you can share it with other people. And Ken ends the rule book of Void 1680 AM with Void radio is real. I broadcast it out of my backyard, like on an AM radio station. And like every week on Sunday nights, he broadcasts a real fan submitted, like player submitted one of these on YouTube and streams it. And there's this whole like community that just gets in the comments, and it's not that big.
I know what I'm doing like next week.
Yeah. It's 5, 20 people or something watching these YouTube streams.
Yeah.
But it's like a fun, cool thing to do. Yeah. And it's like, is that actual play? That's totally actual play. Mm-hmm. But it is also like, it's not. It's so different. We're going to do a whole episode about that.
But
like, that is so different from like the traditional kind of Dungeons and Dragons, Dimension 20 Critical Role, Die Guys style actual play that we're talking about here. And like, so I'm not like opposed to actual play as a medium, but like I have this long history also of like going to see improv and being like, that looks really fun to do, and I'm like not having a great time. Like it's just kind of, they're just up there being goofy and like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And I think Die Guys season 2, we like found something where, and like maybe it's like the Stockholm syndrome of just like being involved with the production, but like a lot of people out there clearly love the kind of like improv and actual play that I'm talking about here too. But I really feel like we figured out how to make something cool, and I'll probably cut that whole fucking ramble out because it's me shitting on actual play. But like, I don't know, like that is kind of. That's where I'm coming from, and where I was coming from coming into this show too.
I get what you're saying. I think that I watch a lot of shows, and I am questioning I'm questioning how genuine the people are.
So this is one of the pins that I wanted to come back to, actually.
Cool.
So M. Friedman is a professor of, I don't remember what she's a professor of, but she's a professor who studies actual play.
Cool.
And she's like well known in the actual play community and the RPG community as a person who is very cool and very smart. And hopefully I will be having her on later this season.
Yeah.
But like one of the things that she talks about is this idea that a lot of people out there are like saying the same thing as you. Like, there's no way that, like, Dimension 20, like, Brennan's home game looks the same as Dimension 20. There's no way that, like, Matt Mercer's home game looks the same. But, like, when she has gone and talked to those guys, they have been like, it's the same.
Yeah.
It just is the same.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm really curious about that idea. And I want to, like, break down a lot of the details here today of, like, what is that true for us, right? Like, what was different? And between, like, if you were getting together, Miles, Zach, Keith, Joyce, and maybe me to, like, be there with the rule book, to, like, play D&D over the kitchen table, like, would that look different from what we did? And I think the answer is yes. But I think, like, the ways in which it looks different are not how you are DMing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I can agree with that. I think that... And I would say it at the beginning, it also was, there was a larger breadth between how I would play or like how I would naturally play and then on camera. Yeah. And I think it narrowed as we got towards the end of it.
So talk about the beginning then. So what was different for you at the beginning?
The beginning was setup. I feel like in a way that I don't naturally do for my games, because it is more collaborative. Not that this wasn't collaborative, but it was collaborative in a show way as opposed to collaborative in a story way. And I'll maybe try and elaborate on that.
Yeah.
But at home, I think I would prepare less with the expectation that my friends are going to bring crazy shit in and we'll all sort of like figure things out together. I still want a strong story and maybe I'll have beats that I want to hit. Yeah. But I think that I feel far less anxious, I guess, about where a story will end than I did at the beginning of Die Guys. Like I was like, I need to have some real beats because one, these are all fresher players and I want to be able to support them and make sure that they know that like, no matter what they do, like, I'll have a plan. I'm trying to seem perhaps a bit more prepared than I feel. But I was thinking when doing the planning and when doing my preparation that I was almost writing a script
100%.
Initially. It felt far more like I'm writing a script as if I were writing a show. Yeah. At like a TV show, and this is how I imagine an opening scene. And I think that was really important for Die Guys, for the setup, to give everybody a place to like grab onto. And then as we started going along and forward, we were playing off of each other more. And I was watching them explore the space in ways that I hadn't anticipated. Yeah. And then it became more natural.
It's so... They're all coming out of, like, Second City, right? Yeah. Like, they're coming out of that improv world. True. And, like, the thing that they are going to naturally be bringing in is that, like, moment-to-moment doing goofs.
Yes.
And providing a stronger railroad, let's call it what it is in D&D terms, is going to provide, like, more space for them to just, like, find goofs, focus on goofs, and do goofs.
Interestingly enough, it gives them more space.
Yes.
Like, it makes
something I'm saying on this show all the time. Yeah. Like, we were... talking on an episode a couple of months ago about like this idea of play to find out is like a phrase in the indie world that a lot of games have adopted, originally from Apocalypse World by McGay and Vincent Baker. And it's like, we're trying to, don't plot anything, right? Don't plan anything. We're playing to find out what's going to happen is the original intention of this phrase. But I think I was talking with Sharon Biswas on another episode about like, you can be playing to find out a lot of other things. Like we can lock down what's going to happen and then play to find out how are we going to feel about it. Or we can play to find out what are the goofs going to be, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, let's tell a little story. I know where this will go. Well, that's not true. I knew where I was going to have it go, and then some things went awry at the end.
And that's D&D,
that was
right?
fun.
And
Yeah,
that's
that was
fun.
what it should have been.
Yeah. Okay, so we more or less agree that like the actual playing of the Dungeons and Dragons like doesn't the sentiment that we are coming in with to play the Dungeons and Dragons doesn't change a lot when the cameras are off versus when they're on.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about like what does change, and that finally brings me to the title of this fucking episode, rolling the dice on camera, because I think this is really
40 minutes in.
Yeah, like this is the perfect thing to show off how production works.
Yeah.
Because what happens when we're just sitting around playing Dungeons and Dragons and you call for a skill check, right? Like, let's role play that. Let's just do that right now, right? Like,
I brought dice with me.
Oh, you brought dice? Hell yeah.
I brought dice with me.
Yeah.
I knew that they would come in handy.
All right, so MJ, you are in a dark forest, and you are sneaking along to your next place. What are you hunting?
I have always had a penchant for venison.
Venison?
That's what I'm hunting.
I think you're hunting the elusive white stag because it's supposed to be especially delicious. And you're moving through the woods. You're doing your best. When you hear something behind you, like a twig snaps, you want to give me a perception check to see if you see what's going on.
I got a 12.
You got a 12. Well, what's your perception modifier?
I think that I'm very astute. I have beautiful hazel eyes, and they let in quite a bit of light. My halfling hazel eyes.
Halfling hazel eyes. Okay.
So I'm going to say a +3.
+3. Okay, so that's what you have, like a 17. Is it wisdom for perception?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's say wisdom. So you've got like a 17 wisdom. Are you're not proficient?
I'm proficient at looking.
Okay, cool. So that's probably another +2, right?
Yeah.
So you probably get a +5 here.
Yeah.
And what did you say you rolled? You rolled a 12? Okay, so you got a 17.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for perfectly demonstrating what I was trying to get at here,
Yeah.
which is there's something behind you, right? Like we're building tension. What could that be? Maybe it's the mega stag, the mother stag is behind you, right? Coming for you. Like, we don't know. What is it? What is it going to be? Roll the die. Let's find out. And then we do 30 seconds of like, okay, you rolled a 12. What's your perception? Like all this, and like so much tension gets let out of the moment.
Yeah.
And I think like in just straight conversation between us, that's not a huge deal. Like it's a much less big of a deal. It still matters. Like I think in a game where you're trying to do to build up tension, but like broadly speaking, any moment of randomness in a role-playing game is a moment of like you know, and like it feels better when you roll the die and you look at it, and then everyone gets to go all at once.
You really I'll say like you really prioritize that on set, and I hadn't. Because I was so used to doing it just with friends, I hadn't really thought about that before.
Yeah, and I hadn't either. It was
striking. It was striking how different.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was editing the first season of the Die Guys where I was like, oh, this sucks. Because like the moment I want is like, call for the perception roll. We roll and here it is. Yeah. And like, here's the results. And like, either it's no or it's yeah. Like you get the triumph or the failure. Yeah. And so on the second season, I was constantly telling people I did a whole little mini workshop before the thing of like, I want everyone to say up front, like you call for a roll and then we discuss what's my bonus on the roll. Yeah. And then we all say out loud, that means like this is a DC 15, you have a +5. That means on the die, you need to roll a 10. Yeah. And so then we will say, I need to roll a 10 in order to get this. Because that was the other interesting thing about Dungeons & Dragons and modifiers is anyone on camera was naturally looking at the die and then saying the number on the die. Yeah. So you'd often get a thing where you're like, it's a DC 15, and then Zach would be like, I got a 10, and that's a success, but that sounds fucking weird. Yeah. And so we're also trying to make a show for people who've never played D&D before, and we want them to be able to follow along, at least to some extent. And so that let's step back, let's like get in there, let's do all this setup ahead of time, then say the number we need to roll on the die, and then roll. Yeah. It was like, and then oftentimes there'd be all this negotiation, right? That like we, because I don't think you want to like remove the idea of dice rolls entirely. There are actual plays that do that, and that's
interesting.
That's fine. Then you're sort of like using role playing games as a way to inspire your audio drama, right? To devise
I was gonna say, that's
your
collaborative storytelling of and
totally
just talking it through. It's fun.
So I didn't think it was right to like remove the roles entirely, but like building, just like like getting those roles to like function properly was such an ordeal and such a like designed experience too.
Right, having the immediacy and ironing it out, I think, was so important for also everyone else's performance.
Yeah,
because they're professionals. Like all of the people that were talent this season are professionals in like the improv world and the digital space, and they know how to make like a fun reaction or like be in the moment, and they are excited. Like, to be clear, I think every single one of them was in the game. You know, it wasn't just like we're playing the game. It was all of them seemed pretty invested.
Yeah,
and when we distill the roles down to be immediate, their performance, I felt, was aided. They were able to like not be broken out of character, and it doesn't matter how professional you are. If you like have to take a beat back or like are thrown off for a second, it will take a little bit to get back into it.
Yeah,
and I think it really served the entire thing.
Totally,
you can have that.
There are plenty of moments in Die Guy's second season, even where you have the thing where it's like Miles rolls a 12, and then we have a little conversation about it, and then I'm like, can we just Miles have you roll the die and then say it's a 12 and have everyone react?
Yeah,
and then everyone does, and like I think. Then oftentimes what you have is like the build up to the initial roll, and then the result from the like the reshoot.
Yeah.
And like I think even then sometimes you can feel like for a small role this works a low stakes role this works pretty well because the kind of reaction you're getting from people is like yeah that's great.
Nice.
Whereas like for the really big dramatic stuff you can't do this retake because it's like you can just feel it when it's inauthentic.
Quick aside, really interesting for me as somebody who isn't talent normally. I think
You're
that
new
was
talent.
I'm new talent. I think that I've had experience acting and doing like stage productions a lot when I was younger, and I think that I can be pretty animated for sure, but I just never had the experience that they had, all being like BuzzFeed alumni of like knowing what it's like to be in a YouTube video and making a YouTube video that does numbers and then building a persona perhaps around the way that people had perceived you in your hits. So it's been really interesting and striking for me as a DM who is like, I can't call myself like the lead actor. That's not what I mean here. But I am most of the people in the D&D world. And so trying to act with all of these people in so many different ways was such a particular challenge, but also really fun for me to like do that with them as somebody who I like don't have a persona yet. Maybe I will.
One of the ways they are also very talented is they have experience playing off of people who are new to being on camera, like you, right? And like they know how to make you look good. It's a remarkable skill to be able to do that.
They lift each other up, and I felt myself being lifted up as we all were there.
So another thing I was kind of interested in getting into is like I learned a lot about Dungeons & Dragons itself by making this show. I'm curious if there's anything about Dungeons & Dragons. Maybe I'll go first to like lay this out.
Sure.
So for example, like I made this whole like series on Dungeons & Dragons on Dice Exploder last year, and that was happening like right at the same time that we were making the first episodes of Die Guys. And something that I feel like I really walked away from that series thinking about was like almost all of the like mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons are not interesting to me. Not necessarily good per se. Like, why do we need all these different numbers? And like some people like getting into that math and that crunch and that kind of stuff. But I think like even in those contexts, like there are better ways to do that. Like there's a difference between a really complicated board game where you're like, what is going on? And like Arcs or Twilight Imperium, like these really big games that have a ton going on but are like still really elegant. And I think D&D is less that. But the thing that D&D the thing that D&D does have is like really sticky stereotypes for people to like pick up and either run with or bounce off of, like push off of, right? Honestly, like to me, the like strength of Dungeons and Dragons is race and class. That like I'm gonna be a dwarf, but I'm gonna be a dwarf wizard. And what does that mean? Because that puts me in opposition to what it normally means to be a dwarf and what it normally means to be a wizard. And suddenly I can like imagine the ways that like I'm in conflict with my culture because why am I a wizard? But I'm also like lagging behind the other wizards because I'm a dwarf and like not naturally good at this. And you can get something from that, like out of every race class combination, even something like an elf druid, like a really classic thing. It's like, what is it that's going to make you different from a normal elf druid? And I think that sort of set of things that Dungeons and Dragons has is a really, really powerful set of, for lack of a better term, suggestions from the audience, right? Like when you're actually sitting down to do improv. And that to me is what makes Dungeons and Dragons actually pretty good as a system for actual play, that you are getting these strong suggestions for people to do goofs off of, and you're also getting the like swinginess of the die roll, like for a particular kind of comedy that is maybe not necessarily my typical like go-to brand, but is I think the like Try Guys go-to brand. That like critical hits and critical misses. Like we had a whole half hour long like divergent from someone rolling a natural one and us just like piling on nonsense on top of it. And we don't need to get into the details. We don't need to just spoil the wonderful details.
I just want to say Miles was so mad.
He was
but also,
so mad.
He was so angry, and it was real anger at first until he realized how funny it was.
Yeah,
like,
but he's also like, he's smart enough to know to like play up the anger and indignation in that. And like that's what the swingy D20 roll, which is I think the other great strength of D&D for this kind of actual play, is like leaning into the comedy of it and the high variance of it. Like the reason that you bring randomness into a game that like turns actual play into something special and not just sort of like long form improv, which is special in its own way, to be clear, but like that randomness forces you to deal with the unexpected, forces you to go in new directions. And so that like, as much as I still think like there's too many skills, I don't care about the numbers, the modifiers bog everything down, like all this stuff that I don't really like about Dungeons and Dragons, and think does detract from the actual like it would be so much easier to just be like, you always succeed on a 10 plus, and like then we don't have to deal with the problems I was talking about earlier with all the like the setting up the die roll. I do think that like the race class stuff is like really effective for actual play, and I do think that the like swingy die roll is really effective for this kind of actual play.
A little anecdote about that specifically, and about the character building being suggestions basically. I remember learning the difference between the point buy system versus like going random with the die rolls, and the very first time that I tried rolling for my stats, I had such a great time because it helped me define a character. And I remember like what numbers I got absolutely don't matter, but like I was, a wizard that was so stupid, or like something, it was so interesting to have, and for clarification for anybody, intelligence is how wizards usually do all of their shit. So I think once I had stereotypes to work with, like starting points, and then I rolled those stats and they challenged maybe my initial thought of like, oh, okay, I'm an elf wizard. That's pretty cool. I can do something with that. And then they're stupid and they're beefy. I'm like, okay, that changes a lot.
Himbo wizard, let's do it.
Right. And I really love that, because that's how I do some of my NPCs, frankly. Like if I don't have a person in mind, I'm in the back like, okay, this is Shimbleshanks, he fucking loves eating dirt. And
he loves eating dirt, and his best friend's a centipede.
And he's so smart, dude. You don't understand how many minerals. Like, I roll up too high in intelligence chat. Yeah. He eats dirt, but he is a fucking super genius, and you're about to learn so much from him. Like, it's fun to play in the space with myself first, and then throw it to the people that I'm playing with and see what they do with the weird shit that I'm putting down. Like, that is, I agree, a strength of Dungeons and Dragons, because I guess just by virtue of it being kind of like, I can't imagine it's one of the oldest, but it's like very established. You know what I mean? Like, it's had so many iterations and it has a big following. So I feel like there is, as much as that can sometimes be negative, because people are like, you're playing it wrong. You're playing D&D wrong.
There's a lot of discussion about what makes D&D like not a great actual play system, and the audience coming and yelling at you about getting the rules wrong is under discussed.
Yeah, and that shit sucks. But there is, when people can open their hearts and open their minds to fucking with the rules, to playing around in the space, I think that leads to truly interesting moments.
Going off that idea you were just saying of fucking with the rules, I wanted to talk about Zach's disguises. So,
how can I love a man so much and yet hate everything that he is with every fiber of my being? How?
Yeah. So let's talk about Zach's disguises. Do you want to talk about the basic premise for what Zach's character was, and then this essentially like whole cloth mechanic that he showed up to the table with?
Yeah, Zach was a turtle rogue. Yep. Turtles being like the turtle race in D&D, and Zach can't be somebody that isn't like somebody else already. Yeah. He loves to just like rework movie characters because that's how his brain works. Yeah. And he was like, I gotta be the master of disguise from fucking the master of disguise. I have to be like turtly enough for the Turtle Club. So he came up with the idea, almost didn't do it, but I said, Zach, you've already been a bird. I think it'd be really funny if you were a turtle. Yeah. And then came up with a huge list of ideas. I think it was more than 20, but like 20 at a time. Yep. For the D20, of different costumes and characters that his turtle would take on. And he was like, every time we're in a situation that doesn't require anything else, that doesn't require a disguise, he was like, I'm just gonna roll this die and we're gonna see who I become. And it was really fun. And then until he was a hot dog.
Yeah. Well, so like he's already in a turtle costume on camera. Right. And then on top of that, whenever he decides it's time to put on a disguise, he like randomly determines what the disguise is. Yeah. And then I would hand him a prop from a giant prop table of like costumes from previous videos that was somehow related to that disguise, right? Mm-hmm. So I believe one of the first ones is he becomes this like Justin Bieber, like pop star kind of like character, right? And so I gave him some enormous plastic novelty sunglasses. Yeah. And so I just found so many interesting things to be going on with this mechanic. The first was like, would you show up to your home game with this mechanic? Probably not, because you're probably not bringing an enormous costume bag to your home game. Although I have done an episode about how you should do that. But you've got this enormous costume bag. You've got all this effort. It's also like very attention hoggy, right? Like it's very like taking the spotlight. Right. And in a group that has a lot of trust, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, I'm going to do my, like, big spotlighty thing. Yeah. And then I'm going to sit back and let you do your big thing. Right. But I think when you are on camera making, like, an entertainment thing and everyone is being paid to be here, like, it feels much less bad to, like, do that when you think it's a good bit. Yeah. And everyone else, like, you trust everyone else, again, going back to the improv stuff, to be able to, like, react to your Jar Jar Binks costume and go like, that sucks, dude, and like make the like, this sucks, like into a moment at comedy.
Everybody played with it so perfect.
Exactly.
The interplay was exactly what I wanted. And then when he let it slip in that one moment where he was like, actually, I'm a 14-year-old kid, and that
I just like playing dress up, like it becomes a big character
and
thing.
It completely changed the way everybody interacted with him and saw that mechanic. I think that it went through like a perfect metamorphosis. It is exactly what it needed to be. I loved it.
There's this cool thing to do on camera because I think it works better on camera. It's also like a very visual thing, which makes it a great choice for camera. And the joke of he's already in a turtle costume and then he's putting another costume on top of that, like, makes it funnier than it would be at home where he's probably not showing up in a turtle costume. Although, again, I did an episode about how you should do that. And like, the other thing I found really interesting about it, though, is that it felt like such a... I'm new to Dungeons and Dragons and I don't fully understand the rules. I just know that like sometimes we roll a d20 and like that's fun. And so like I'm going to show up with my own like homebrew. Like I think the most memorable moment for me in any part of Die Guys was in the first season. There's a moment where like you're trying to just say what's happening, and Zach like is coming in like stepping on your toes, like taking over a character, and he's doing a voice and he's like just trying to play along, and you're like, Zach, I get to do this part, and he's like, oh, I get it. Being the DM is the fun part. And like that to me says so much about how like I love GM-less games. Like I want everyone to be able to do that because I do think that's the best part. I want to be able to share that with people. And at the same time, like a show like this really benefits from someone who is facilitating and keeping people on track and like, leading the circus, as it were. But it felt so much out of that spirit, out of this man who like really wants to like dig into that world, to be that DM kind of thing, to show up with the whole fucking mechanic. And that's such a joy too. Like that, and like it doesn't make any sense. Like because either it's like, first of all, why is his character not deciding what costume to put
why
on?
Is it
like
random?
He's just like locked in on the thing. Like it doesn't make sense. And then like sometimes, he's showing up and he's putting on like a Jar Jar Binks costume and then rolling a nat 20 on his follow-up persuasion check. And then like we have to like abide by it. And like that's stupid. But like the point, D&D is a comedy game, right? Like the way we are playing it, it's a comedy game. So that all works out. And this feels like a really welcome addition for all those reasons. So it felt like this mechanic that was so actual play, was so Dungeons and Dragons, and also was so different from the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. I found that really interesting.
Pulling that on like a real stringent DM and it not going well.
So I mean,
it was perfect for
you
this,
could dissolve a whole group that way. I'm like, I think
RPG
probably a more responsible way to use that mechanic would be to show up and sort of tell you about it in advance and get everyone on board. But then, like, at a table where I'm sitting down with friends, I would want to sort of know what the hell we're doing in advance. But when we're showing up on camera, there's like entertainment to be found in this, like, what is Zach doing? Like, but then also the power dynamic is different and interesting because he's your boss. Like, I don't, the whole thing. Like,
can I tell? This is another aside. Can I tell you because like D&D is perhaps a notoriously horny game. Many tabletop games are. Gotta tell you, at the beginning when we were all trying to figure out like how do we flirt? How do we interact? Because
this is a workplace.
The way that like. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a moment where...
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The fucking Zach was like flirting, because Mr. Beaks was like a weirdly horny bird. And he was like trying to flirt with a character that I was playing. And I was like, Zach, I'm happy to do this with you, but like, you have to understand, are you attempting to flirt with me? Like, are you comfortable with us acting out a sex scene? You and I, my boss? And he was like, point taken. And then he immediately pivoted to flirting with Keith. And then them having their own moment. I was like, that's fine. And it's not that I'm not comfortable. I'm happy to do it. But there is, we have audience members that maybe would feel less appreciative of the moment that happened. So anyway, this isn't anything, but...
Well, this is really interesting, but it's a whole episode of talking about safety, right? Because I found that moment really interesting and really demonstrative of how safety works in practice at a table, right? Which is something you don't get to often see on camera.
That's true.
Because on camera, usually a moment, any kind of safety discussion leads to the thing getting edited out.
Right.
But, it's this really interesting place where you have a a lot of different power dynamics going on, right? You have the traditional dungeon master and player power dynamics. You have all the workplace power dynamics. You have the like knowledge gap power dynamics of like who knows how to play D&D and or who's familiar with D&D and who's not. And then you have Zach coming in and doing the classic, like, I mean, I think this is a classic meme of like thing people hate is like the guy who comes in and just like tries to fuck everything.
Wow, what a hot bartender.
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of ways like that, like that's another interesting thing with actual play where like around the table, like I really don't want to play with Zach when he's doing that. Like I really don't want to play with that guy. Yeah. But like once you put it on camera, then it becomes funny again to me because it's like, oh, it's like he knows that this is annoying to everyone else at the table, and everyone else can play up being annoyed, and now it's like a bit that like is for the audience to laugh at him doing it, and like suddenly I'm on board again. Yeah. That is really interesting.
It's interesting what like the lens of viewership does to things. Like it is a fascinating way to go about any entertainment. Yeah. Because there are so many things that I'm like, I would hate this. This is like reading like all of the books that are on Book Talk that I don't read, but are about like being kidnapped and stalked by this really hot vampire. Yeah. And I'm in the safety of my own home when I read that. And I'm consenting to this experience. Yeah. But in real life, pretty upsetting.
Right.
So 100%, there's something to be said about like when the expectation is that there is safety and we are all communicative on the show. And I think people rightfully assume that we are all cool with this, it makes them feel comfortable to enjoy something that would otherwise be kind of like dubious.
Well, and this is what I was trying to get to exactly of like, I did a whole episode on safety tools in LARP specifically, but also like with a lot of overlap with tabletop play. And you know, there's the X card, there is lines and veils, there are all of these tools to try to ensure safer play. And like fundamentally, none of those tools can ensure that you are safe at the table. Like none of there is no tool, there's no magic fix to ensure that you are safe having a conversation with another human being, you know? And it's nice, I think, to have frameworks like the X card, like lines and veils when you are out playing with strangers, especially where even if we like all assume the best in each other, we like don't have an established rapport to like build up and talk about stuff. But the best safety tool is just trust at the table and liking and respecting each other. And that plays out in exactly the moment that we then saw on camera here, where like Zach's going around flirting with everything. It's not really getting far, but like when it finally starts going far enough that it's like, hey,
we'll be going
we can I consent to keep going, but we should check in on the power dynamics here. And then Zach being like, good call, I will pull back on like redirect. Like that's how safety actually works. And that's like a really, I think, a great model of safety at the table, a great model of how to approach these kinds of conversations is that particular moment. And it's maybe it becomes less of a great model again because we're on camera, it becomes a moment of humor, right? Like we are having a safety conversation right now, but we also are like aware that we are performing at the same time. And so then we're like playing it up and making it into a bit. And that is maybe not ideal. Like maybe the better way to have that conversation would have been for me to cut it out, or to have stepped in at the time and been like, because I don't know that I could have cut it out just given from the way the content worked. So like maybe that would have been a moment where it would have been nice for me to step in and be like, hey, we should take that again in a way where we can cut out that awkward moment. But also like because we all trust each other, because like y'all do have like a pretty good rapport, like I think everyone was comfortable the whole time. Like I don't think there was any problem. And like that's safety at work.
It's trust, and it's also the true belief that not a single person in there has any malicious intent. You know what I mean? Like, because I think what I've dealt with in the past at tables that were problematic was like defensiveness and an immediate tendency to lash outward. But the safety at this table was exemplified explicitly by everybody being so ready to pause, think, understand themselves, and I just couldn't ask, frankly, for a better like a better situation or a better handling of those types of situations.
There's not been a person that I have directly worked with at this company that I did not feel like I could like completely trust, and like that has felt really great.
Yeah, I truly feel that way.
So I want to come back a little bit to rolling the dice on camera as a concept, but I want to talk about those sort of the mother lode of rolling dice. I want to talk about combat on camera and D&D combat at large.
Yeah.
So let's start with Dungeons and Dragons combat off camera.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not great.
It's not great. It's always slow.
Like, this is another thing that I sort of took away from this D&D series that I did, is combat is kayfabe tactical wargaming. Where, do you know kayfabe?
I don't know.
Kayfabe is the pro wrestling thing where you are like pretending that this is real.
Okay, got you.
So in some ways, like kayfabe is role playing, right? Like we're just pretending to be our guys and we're running around doing our things. But I think specifically D&D combat is kayfabe, smart guy, tactical crunchy gaming. Because actually, the way D&D works, like it's really hard to like make a choice in combat that matters, right? Like mostly you should just like hit them with the thing that does the most damage, and you should do that every round. But that's not fun. And so but like also D&D tries to make it so that essentially no matter what you do, it does about the same amount of like hitting them. But you know, it's like, and maybe you're running around and helping people up, and that's part of it too, and whatever. But like it's so complicated for what goal? But also, like, some people really enjoy that kayfabe. You know, like, Keith, if you're listening to this, like, I know that you really want to do a combat on camera, like, next season, right?
Yeah,
like,
Keith and Miles absolutely are both people who enjoy the grittiness and the numbers, and I, frankly, enjoy it a lot, too.
Yeah.
It's valuable for me personally. It is not valuable for storytelling. It is fun because I'm somebody who likes video games, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, kayfabe is fun. Like doing that kind of thing is fun, and like if especially once you have some amount of mastery of the thing, like of the way the rules work, then you can do the thing and feel clever without having to actually become like a next level chess player, right? Like you need to sort of understand how the machine works, but that's a different skill set than actual strategy and tactics, right? And it can be really fun to like narrate your character being really cool.
Yeah,
you know?
Badass moments are always excellent and fun to get into.
And I think there are better games for doing that, but like I found it really interesting to like how combat ended up playing out on camera in the edit, because in the first season of Die Guys, we had a couple of combats, and by the time I was done editing them, it was kind of fun to watch. It was so I wrote down some numbers here because I'm a psychopath, but like in the first episode of Die Guys, there was an 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 22 seconds of combat, which edited down to, in the raw footage, which edited down to 26 minutes and 14 seconds of combat. So only 39% of the runtime remained, which when you think about D&D combat feels about right.
That's about right.
You know, you're taking out all of this dilly-dally.
A lot of paper shuffling and can I do this?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, this is really where we learned how to do that dice rolling thing we were talking about earlier, is like even in the first episode, we were learning by the end of combat, you needed to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to take my 30 minutes or whatever, like figure out what I'm going to do in my turn. Yeah. And then at the end, it's like, okay, summarize for the camera. Yeah. What have you decided to do and how are you doing it? Yeah. And you want to like keep in all the mechanics still, but all the dithering just went out the window. Yeah. And you ended up with this like pretty snappy feeling combat sequence.
Yeah, decently streamlined.
And it's still like not my preference, but like I found it remarkable how much more entertaining it was than I was expecting it to be. Yeah. I think an important point of comparison here is what about the non-combat stuff, right? Mm-hmm. How much did that edit down? So we had 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds of non-combat footage, which, you know, about the same amount as combat footage, which edited down to 33 minutes and 7 seconds, or about 52%. Okay. So that's honestly a lot less of the non-combat footage remaining than I expected.
Yeah, honestly.
I expected, you'd end up with like 60, 70% of like the sort of more conversational part of the game and then 40% of the combat stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot closer than you'd think, which really just shows how much fucking dithering there is in any conversation. And this is like a huge strength of any post-production produced actual play, like non-streamed actual play, right, is the ability to go in and just make everything punchier.
Yeah.
Like this is why I like the Adventure Zone and Dimension 20 more than Critical Role, because I don't really want to watch the full raw 8-hour footage of playing. I want to watch the 1 hour of everything condensed at the end.
I agree.
But so I found this really interesting, and this was really educational about Dungeons and Dragons combat to me, that like probably it is a lot more entertaining once you are playing with a group that 100% has system mastery. People have made their decisions before their turn comes around, and you can really go like bam, 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 bam. Maybe it says something that I've never played in a group like that. No one, I think, has ever played in a group like that. Yep. Very few people anyway.
Yep. I think that combat is a very particular struggle for me as a DM on camera. Like, it's a struggle in real life already, but everybody is hanging out. We're all having drinks and snacks, and it's sort of whatever. It doesn't feel nearly as much as much as a performance as it certainly does on camera. Yeah. And then nobody cares. We're all just here to hang out, have a story.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to keep it engaging and have a story in my home games, but it's far more leisurely.
Yeah.
And then to do it in a setting where I felt the stakes of the story as well as the stakes of the production day, that was a totally new experience.
It's so time consuming, and like time is the scarce resource when filming these things, right?
I can't tell you how often I'm like looking at the clock and panicking because I'm like, how the fuck am I going to wrap this up? Like, we got to get out of here. I can't keep them for X number of hours over, or then our budget has to expand to pay for people's like extra half day or pay for meals. And I'm like, it's always like a battle of resources. And I think it's a battle of resources and a battle to go back to the combat. Beautiful segue, MJ. Keep that in, Sam. The fighting aspect, specifically combat, it's so tempting to want to skip through that shit. Like, it is hard to keep people interested, and we've certainly improved from season 1 by leagues, like it's much better, and we've gotten a lot snappier, but I still didn't fully like how this one had to end, because we had our big ending scenes, and I had to cut combat short because it was the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
And I felt like I'm trying to be as natural as possible. I'm trying to let the dice truly decide, but dice sometimes are like, actually, we're just going to hang middle of the road, or actually everything's going to fail, and what could have been a 30-minute encounter is now 2.5 hours because you guys are almost dead. Yeah. Like, it is so interesting to approach combat for this show, because I want it to be real, I want it to be fun, I want it to be hard, and I want it to be narratively enticing. And I still don't know how to do all of those things perfectly at once. And I don't, this is just my crux to bear, my cross to bear.
Well,
is dealing with this.
I have a lot of thoughts about this please. I was typing furiously while you were talking. First of all, I think a really insightful thing in there is that, like, pacing and like keeping track of pacing and facilitating the pacing of something is a very important skill on any production. It's also a very important skill, I think, as a DM, as a GM at large. Yeah. I think this is something I'm remarkably good at. Like, this is my superpower as a DM is like, even in a home game, I'm like looking at the clock, we've got an hour left. Okay, I know we need to get to X, like, I can feel we're in the middle of this thing happening. We need to get through the next thing that's happening to get to a satisfying cliffhanger, and then we'll like stop there. Like, I know how to start like speeding things along and so forth. And I think that that is a skill that you have but are also still developing, and like it's a hard thing to do while you're doing all these other things and you're under the lights, as you were talking about. Another thing we're sort of implicitly talking around is the idea that the more time you spend in combat, you are getting what was the weird percentage number I gave? 39. Like 14% less footage than if you're outside of combat. And that means you have 14% less usable footage and usable content you can put online. And when you're trying to think about like footage online equals money, right? Yeah. Like combat is costing you extra money.
Yep.
And that's tricky. Then to get back into the mechanics of the actual rolling the dice, like one of the reasons I think that D&D would not be my choice for an actual play system that does any kind of combat is this thing where like sometimes you just roll and you miss and that's your turn and then we're moving on. And like at home, that's kind of a thing. And it's like they're over there handling that and you and I are like over here talking about theory and how your day was and everything and we're eating chips and it's all totally fine.
Right.
Or it's not totally fine and you hate it, but like there's more tolerance for that in a certain kind of group.
But it's abysmal on camera.
On camera, it sucks. It's just dead air, especially if it came after a ton of dithering. Like, do I want to attack this person? Do I want to fireball them? What do I want to do? Yeah. And then I attack them and I miss. Well, shit. That sucks, And
it's a bad feeling and it's discouraging. And that's, if there is a single thing that I am always trying to avoid at my tables, it is my characters or my players feeling discouraged.
Yeah.
Like discourage is the worst.
Yeah.
Because I want them to either like be trying to think outside of the box or trying to do like they're always trying. I want my heroes to always feel like even when things suck, I have to keep trying. I like narratively and them at the table in the game. But the second they do something and nothing happens, that sucks.
It's so
I would rather something bad happen.
It's just so boring. Yeah. I mean, this is like breaking out. There's been a lot of theory I've been reading recently in game design about like anytime you roll dice, you like something should fucking happen.
Yeah.
Like you need the story to go forward. You just like that's the thing that you want. Like anything else is just the mind killer,
Yeah.
And I think that is doubly true. This is the point I was trying to make about like maybe it's more tolerable when like you and I can go over here and eat our Funyuns and like hang out, but like we're probably getting bored and that sucks.
Bitch.
But like on camera, especially when the point is we are creating an entertainment product, like we are creating a story for people to follow, like it's more important than ever that you don't have just I mean, this is a problem I have with Netflix. I just watched The Residence, which is this like fun murder mystery show. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, I had a lot of fun. There's a lot to love in that show. And also I could feel that like classic Netflix delay tactic to like turn this 2-hour movie into an 8-episode series of like, well, we're going to just spend more time doing the same thing again without changing anything.
Yeah. I don't want to feel the gears moving.
Exactly.
I want the machine to function, you know? Like, it's rough combat specifically with that. Like it's one thing when they're outside of combat and I feel like I can more easily play in the space when they have a bad roll or when like, oh, they fail at a roll and that bookshelf looks really weird to you and they go over and it's a trap or like something is, I can do something that, like you said, pushes the story along, even if it's in a way that is like hard for them to deal with, at least it's something.
Yeah.
But in combat, and maybe this is something that I want to experiment more with and look into and try and perfect, but like, I feel like if they fuck up, there's not much I can do. I can't.
You miss. We're moving on.
You miss is so
This is just the problem with the system. It's like they get a 9, they needed a 10, and so they miss, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And like that sucks. I do think the one sort of lever that you have as a DM, and especially a DM on camera, is, and this is a hard skill to learn how to implement with Dungeons and Dragons, because Dungeons and Dragons does not make it easy. But the ability to say, and then you kill the rest of them, and then the rest of them run away. The ability to just like call combat as soon as we know what the outcome is going to be, as soon as we're sure.
It's kind of what I did at the end of, maybe no spoilers for the end of Die Guys, but like when things had to keep moving forward, I was like, how do I want this to play out? I can see where combat is heading. and I want to set up what could be, if I get more episodes and give me more seasons, what could be a really interesting thing to come back to. Or a villain arc that I can see spanning over a couple seasons or episodes. I think that was like the first time that I had sort of done it in a way that I felt kind of successful with it, where I was like, all right, let's pull the rug here and leave them wanting more.
Right. I think there is also something interesting in the act of saying, because the thing that happens there is you basically just had all the villains run away, and like not all of them got away, but like that was the thing that happened, and we stayed in combat for it, and and that's great. But I also think there's a lot of value in the skill of being like, okay, these guys have like 20 hit points left each, but y'all each have 60 hit points left. So like, how do you want this to end? And like either giving players the reward of getting to decide this is what, like, we kill them all now, and like this is how we do it, and the satisfaction of that.
Or chop the chandelier down and it crushes the rest of them.
Or trying to set up a choice for them of like, okay, these people are here. You can tell they are going to like fight to the death, and you can brutally murder them, or you can like try to bring them in, but it'll cost you this, or like whatever. Like that's not always an easy thing to do, and that is outside the rules of how Dungeons and Dragons works. But like, I think that there is a lever there you can like figure out how to play with. I think the last thing I wanted to say about this is like, I think it's really telling that we did a total of 1 round of combat in season 2 of Try Guys. Like we intended for there to be more. Like there's going to be one big combat at the end, and then like this one critical miss kind of derailed it. And
we also sort of to be fair, we rewrote right before we jumped in. And we were like,
you're maybe going to have a couple hours of it or something.
And honestly, didn't hate it. I enjoyed that choice that we made.
I mean, this is the thing. It's like what we did was we leaned into the parts of D&D I was talking about earlier that I think work best on camera, right? We leaned into using the aesthetics of the game, which I think are they're more a part of the game than the rules are. But we leaned into the aesthetics of the game as essentially improv prompts to let a bunch of improv performers do their thing. And I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah. I also hope they get more comfortable in combat and do things like, I want them to be, this is my wish, I want them to be asking to do more wild shit in combat.
This is the other problem with D&D combat, is that D&D combat does not reward that happening.
It's true. It is restrictive, but I think that I can allow it outside of it. Like that's what I would like to do, is I want them to be like, I'm going to jump behind the bar and see if I can fashion a flamethrower out of like the alcohol and this this candle I found.
Totally.
And I can be like, fuck yeah, let's try it. Like, I think that
have a free fireball. That sounds
great.
Exactly.
I'm working on learning how to encourage them to do that without explicitly being like giving them an easy out of every combat. Well, like I want them to be more comfortable jumping in and making stuff up outside of the confines of the very stringent rules of combat. Like
I think the difficulty really is Dungeons and Dragons. Like combat is such a specific framework in Dungeons and Dragons. It lays out so clearly like what is effective, and when you deviate from that, it is just really hard to make whatever you're doing feel worthwhile and make it feel impactful.
Right.
And also, when we're playing on a battle map, like on a grid, then it feels like a board game, and you're like getting people into that sense of like, I'm going to move my person around the board game, not like I'm going to think creatively about the fictional space that we're in.
Right.
And
I do think they forget that there's like a ceiling. I think that they forget that there are walls and things that they can break. If they wanted to like Samson the temple and knock it all down, I want to encourage them to do that more.
And the other thing there is like, it's really hard to design a area where it's possible to do stuff. Like is there stuff in a courtroom is where this battle takes place? Is there stuff in a courtroom that like makes that easy? Not really. Like it's much like when there's 3 people on a 2-person sized platform over a pit of lava, like that's suddenly we're talking about like, okay, cool, we're going to throw them over. We're going to get creative here. We're not going to just stab them with a sword. But like D&D doesn't help you come up with any of that stuff either. Like if you want that stuff, in my opinion, you should go to the like really, really creative module writing community that's out there in first-party D&D stuff, and also like fan-made stuff, and fan-made stuff for all these fantasy elf games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
This has become a lot more about Dungeons and Dragons combat than specifically things being on camera.
Hate it.
Whatever. No, I do think it's telling that we just didn't do a lot of it in season 2, though.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
The last thing I really wanted to talk about was making decisions around what to keep in post-production. Like, there was, in particular, one long sequence in the second or third episode of Die Guys in which the situation is they have uncovered the beginnings of a conspiracy. They've gone to the Zentarim, which are like a group of mercenaries who are maybe evil, but they're on our side, and gotten some exposition and gotten basically a fetch quest to go to a dungeon in the forest. Yep. And now they're like leaving the Zentarim hideout. They're going back to their bar, and they're going to go to the dungeon in the forest. Yep. And the act of getting there was like half an hour long, maybe an hour. Like, it was a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And was there entertaining stuff in there? Yeah, there was entertaining stuff in there. There was a whole bit about the horses. There was a stable boy that they didn't know existed who worked at the bar that they were all from. And like there was plenty of like entertaining, just like improvers doing goofs at each other's stuff. And also, did anything happen in the plot? No. If you had that on TV, you would cut from, I guess we need to go through the woods, to stomping around in the woods. Ooh, what's that up ahead? And there it is. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, mechanically, of framing scenes. I did a couple episodes on that earlier this year. I think they're really interesting. I've been making a couple of games that are really explicit about framing scenes in interesting ways. And what I've noticed is that Dungeons and Dragons not only discourages the idea of framing scenes, the traditional culture of play is you can't skip anything because what if something happens? And this kind of goes back to that like high variance die roll, right? Like, if we have to roll for everything, if we have to roll for like finding the dungeon in the woods, then like, what if we roll a 1 and we are set upon by bandits or a dragon or something? We need to like allow the space for all that to happen. What if we go back and have to have this interaction with this stable boy, and like suddenly, like we must meet the stable boy. Yeah. And as much as the stable boy, we left all this in, but like as much as meeting the stable boy was entertaining, right? Yeah. Like, and I like ultimately I decided I think all this stuff is D&D. I think these people are being charming. Again, we just like want more content on camera because that's money. Like the stable boy wasn't relevant to the story. You could cut that out. We wouldn't have lost anything.
He's going to be a villain 2 seasons.
Yeah, exactly. We have to know about the stable boy.
He actually is.
I find that conversation interesting in the just concept of playing Dungeons and Dragons, because D&D, again, the culture of play is you have to be there for everything. D&D, the rules system doesn't talk about framing scenes at all. It doesn't give you any tools to do this or do this more effectively. Yeah. But I personally prefer a game that has more hard framed scenes, that is going to be able to keep the pacing up and like cut to what's the next cool piece of action a little bit more.
I see what you're saying.
And do a little bit more soap opera. And so
telenovela ass.
Yeah, well, listen, Pasión de las Pasiones is a game, and is a pretty good game. So I have all those feelings about playing these games, and then coming in, I remember thinking for quite a while, like, do we leave all this in? And I ultimately decided, for reasons of effectively like money, and for reasons of like, there's probably something in here that like MJ loved that like she would be sad to lose. Like, and this is what D&D is too. I left it all in, but I thought about it a lot, and I just wanted to kind of like put that out there as something I was thinking about while making this.
I'm interested in your way of thinking about this, because, and I can see this in myself as somebody who hates, I hate, what's the phrase called? Cutting my darlings.
Kill your darlings.
Yeah. I love my darlings. I don't like to kill my darlings. And I know that when I do my writing or whatever stories I'm involved with, they always benefit. So I do understand that it's a really important process, but my perspective has always been maybe leaning more towards the Critical Role side of like, I just like seeing the craftsmanship, I guess, is what it boils down to. I grew up like playing video games. I don't know if you've ever played any Sierra games from way back when, but like they reward you by like, you should touch everything and you should look at everything, and you need to go to a place and then come back and then go back to that place because something new is there. Like, it really rewards sort of the meandering and the exploring the space. And it's because they needed to fit in a lot of, they only had so much data on a disc.
Yeah, they wanted to pad out the game too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I recognize that there is maybe a less beautiful reason for why those things happen.
Well, it's just a taste thing, right?
Like, but so that's it. It's like I grew up enjoying that very much, and then even later in life really liking long form Let's Plays. Like, that's what got me into YouTube, period. Like, that's where I started, and I just love experiencing something that can cocoon around me, if that makes sense. Like, the full experience of even the mundane grounds me so much in a game and an experience. And there are drawbacks, certainly, that we've already discussed of it. It can be boring, and it can be, not as enticing visually as well. Like, there are absolute drawbacks, but I find it personally really fulfilling to have those moments. And so what I found myself having, the discussion that I was having with myself was like, I know that Sam is right. A lot of this is boring. We should figure out, like, where's good to cut. And I think you did a great job, so I rarely had to give any... I would never give notes like, this should be cut. It really, you handled most of that. But I think that I never felt like you cut things, like you said, that I would have hated to see gone.
Well, how would you have known?
Because I watched everything.
Well, did you watch all the raw footage? Well, that's the thing. I think sometimes...
Do I remember? Yeah.
2 months go by and a joke that was like, you would have... If I'd cut in a whole combat, you would have noticed that and you would have told me to put it back in. But like, I guarantee you there were like one-liner things where you were like, oh, that was really funny.
That was a great line.
And like, you just never saw it in a cut, maybe. Like,
and that's testament to the beauty of editing.
Yeah.
In my mind palace, I bet I remember. I bet I do.
Yeah,
I bet I remember everything.
If you
I
watch
actually
it,
catalog
you would remember
everything funny I say because it's so rare.
You go home in your diary.
I'm like, I think something so funny.
The other thing, I mean, this takes us back to the very beginning of this conversation about, God, this might have been before we were on air even, of talking about podcasts, how there's like kind of two different kinds of podcasts, right?
Yep.
There's the Dice Exploder kind, which is like heavily edited, even though this is like the longest fucking episode I've ever done. But like that, like we took out all the ums and ahs, we like really zeroed in on like the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Versus the kind of show that is a little bit more just like show up, hit record, hang out with your friends. Yeah, allegedly we're talking about RPGs or whatever, but like whatever, then we hit stop and then we publish it.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong with either of those things. They're just really different. And they are consumed in really different ways too. Like, I mean, in podcasts, maybe less so, maybe in
everybody's just listening while they're doing dishes or driving.
Exactly. But like, there's a really different way to how I consume Severance, where I sit down and I watch an episode of Severance, versus how I consume, what's the right example? Versus how I consume like most YouTube content, where it's on my second monitor while I'm doing the thing here, or it's like on my laptop in the other room while I have my AirPods in and I'm doing dishes, like, and I concluded that the Die Guys were very much the latter category of show, that like, yeah, the visuals here, kind of whatever. And even like, one of my problems with actual play has been listening to a bunch of actual play in the lead up to editing season 2. Like, I just wanted to be more familiar with what was out there. I listened to this one called Till Death Do Us Heart, which is about, which is this system Heart by Rowan Rook and Deckard. Did a couple episodes on that a couple of months ago. Which is a really good, which is an actual play that edits itself even more than I do. Like, it's really down to the bone. Like, it moves so fast. Like, they have the mechanics in there barely, like very briefly. This is a fairly complicated game where they will explain concepts once and in like 2 sentences and then move on. And like, if you're paying attention, I love this. This is made for me because there's no dead air. There's nothing. Something is always happening. The performers are really great. It's less comedic and more dramatic. It's got a mix of both, but like it's leaning on the drama side, and you can feel it. There is always something happening. And also, that's not how I listen to a fucking podcast. I need to be able to get distracted by what's the thing that I'm doing, or I just like zoned out for a second, or my partner was talking to me or whatever, and then like I'm back into it. And if the show is the Die Guys, like paced the way I decided that we should pace the Die Guys, then that's fine. You zone out and it's like, yeah, you missed a couple of goofs and like maybe something big is happening now, but like you can pick up what's going on because everything takes 3 minutes to happen. Yeah. And hopefully it's entertaining for that whole 3 minutes, but it's like the one unit of thing is like extended out a little bit more. Whereas this kind of show, it was like, oh, I would tune out for 30 seconds and be lost. Yeah. And so there's clearly a benefit to extending things out. And I also want to be clear, I really liked Till Death Do Us Hard. Like, this was a good show, and like if you're interested in actual play, this is a show that is worth your time. But it was really interesting to see something that I thought did go further than I wanted in my taste.
That's neat.
Along that track.
I am somebody who, even when it is something that I should be able to be distracted by, I like cannot help but give it my full attention. I do not know when this happened, and I've gotten better at sort of like being able to deviate, but this is why I like can't do audiobooks. If I get distracted for a second, even if it doesn't mean anything, or even if it was like a description that doesn't matter, it bothers me to have missed it. And I have to go back. So I wish I knew like when or like why this is the way that I consume content, but I am so enraptured by things that I'm either fully focused or unable to process it. And I feel like that's not how most people are necessarily. So it's probably for the better that we do it the way that we do it. But like when I was reviewing all of Die Guys, I was paying attention. And I felt like I enjoyed it even when I was paying. Like that's
totally.
Of course. But it is interesting to know that other people process things differently, and to find a sweet spot in the construction of, some, whether it's fully audio or audio and visual, like any type of visual audio medium that like is consumed. It is interesting to approach it from the way that people process things.
Totally. So much of like just everything we're talking about is just like taste stuff, like there's so many different decisions. Every decision that we've made has just been, I mean, like some of them have been about money and resources and time, and like there's all of that.
I think that like, it's great.
There's so much taste.
But what's great is that I think you and I actually, despite the amount of things that we have in common, we have very different tastes.
Really
and
different tastes.
And I think that that's why it's really working for us, because we're pulling. And, there are ways that it could suck if we like, pull too far and create a muddied identity for the Die Guys. But I think we do a really good job of understanding where the other is coming from and creating a successful compromise.
It's really nice to be able to be like, no, in this moment, like I insist this is boring. It has to go. And you're like, you're right. Yeah. But there are also times where you're like, no, this is so funny. You can't cut this out. Like we gotta do this thing. And I'm like, you're right.
I think that it really works.
Yeah.
It's my Ghibli. I don't know how big of a Ghibli fan you are, but the way that like there are so many long stretched moments.
Yeah.
And that I'm like drawing a connection right now as to that being like where a lot of my appreciation for it has come from, of like being so in love with the process of something or the intricacies and the craftsmanship and all of that is where I find joy and where I find enjoyment. And I think that like Ghibli films are an excellent example of like, huge landscapes that I can stare at and let it fill me up, and I can appreciate and understand and rewatch thousands of times and always find something new. And I think that's the type of media that I often consume. And then there's punchy, snappy, really fun, really like tight things that I think I am surprised to find myself appreciating, because that's another type of craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. I think that's what
I like it best when it feels, whatever the pacing is, when it feels really intentional. When I feel really like whoever the creator is, I'm in good hands, you know? And I think the nature of Dungeons & Dragons is that it's really hard to control pacing.
Yeah.
And even when you have a expert professional such as Sam Dunawald coming in and crafting the pacing in post-production, it's just
fucking around.
It's a little meandering, you know? And like in a way that is interesting and compelling that I really enjoy, like when I am playing.
Yeah.
And is again just like less my taste as a consumer, I think.
It makes sense that there is also a difference between the consumption and the experiencing of.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
that, of course, is like, you know, it would really bother me to be, we're in hour 8 and haven't done anything in this D&D game.
But
I don't care how much crafting, that would annoy me.
I know people who love games like that. So the last thing to really bring us out, I want to do like big picture. Did you have any goals coming into this? If so, did you accomplish them? And if not, what do you think you sort of got out of it?
For Die Guys Season 2, my goal was to create more of a cohesive story than Season 1 was. Season 1 felt, to me, a bit disjointed in places. I had ideas, but none of them I felt like I was grasping. And it never felt the way that I was hoping and how I enjoy stories, which is to come to the ending and, like you said, feel like I've been in somebody's hands the whole time. Feel like it was intentional and like, oh, everything that I've just experienced is recontextualized and I grasp it and I feel this like moment of elation realizing that there has been this clockwork going on that has been there the whole time and I just saw it. Like I was just able to like understand. It's a moment of clarity. It's a eureka moment. And that's what I really like in things that I consume and shows that I watch, and especially when it's an actual play, I love it because I then am so appreciative of the DM and the players, the way that everybody came together and like, not to throw buzzwords, but like synergy is like real, you know, like it really excites me to watch people create a story and to see like the glow in their eyes as they realize like they're throwing things to each other and they're getting it passed back and it's all working together super well. And I would say I caught glimmers of that in the Die Guys Season 2. It was a really long explanation. My goal was to do kind of like that, or to set up what I hope could be a long form thing where I could have more opportunities to, you know, dust in cool little story moments that will ultimately coalesce in like a cohesion and an explosive finale.
Yeah.
And I think that we had a really good start. I think that I created a good story, and if we never get back to the Die Guys, which is my worst nightmare actually, but if we never get back to the Die Guys, I do think that this story had like a microcosm of what I was looking for.
Totally.
And we got to an end. I guess if I had to distill all of that long shit that I just said, that will certainly be cut down by you, Sam, is I made something intentional. Last time, it didn't feel like, Season 1 didn't feel intentional. Season 2 felt much more intentional. I like that.
I got the impression that like your main goal was like
yeah, you tell me because I clearly don't.
Yeah, was like prove that it was worth making more of this.
Yeah.
And I feel like we did do that. Like we're, you know, life happens, you know, like I think everyone walked out of there and like even now kind of feels like, yeah, it would be worth making more of this, but also like at what cost? Maybe the cost would be too high.
Right.
But I feel like we did make a cohesive season. We left a lot open, but also if nothing else happens, then it was sort of like, cool, we got this like this book and it's got a cliffhanger at the end, but this is the end of a book. Like it felt good. My goals for this season were, did I have goals? I didn't think about this in advance. In a lot of ways, this like was just a job for me, you know? I like my long-term goal is like get the Try Guys to play on camera any game that's not Dungeons and Dragons because I want to raise the profile of games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. Like that's, I think I even told you that in like the first meeting that we had.
And I wanted to, but my bosses love IP. They fucking love IP.
Because like people gotta eat, you know? True. People gotta eat.
Yeah.
And I think being able to say it's Dungeons and Dragons, but we're using a Jenga tower and it works like this, and actually it's called Dread. Like,
we'll totally say that. We would totally lie like that.
Yeah. And do I think that I accomplished that goal? No. But I also think like we made like the first step on that goal is like, let's make something pretty good. Yeah. And I feel like we figured out how to make something pretty good. I feel really satisfied by that. I didn't realize that one of my goals was to like learn a lot about D&D, but I learned so much about D&D in a way that I am like so glad that I had the experience and the opportunity to learn. Like I really, it changed and nuanced my, I'd come in with such a negative opinion about D&D.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still, in the middle of this process, I left a D&D group because I wasn't having a great time, you know? And that wasn't the fault of the players. That was the fault of the game. And
don't hate the players, hate the game.
Yeah, and I stand by that, and I don't want to play D&D, but I also there's so much more to appreciate there, and I really appreciate this process for having gotten me there. Okay, so then to finally end, let's say that on Monday they say we're doing season 3. What are your goals for the next season? Like, what do you want next?
I want them to all have their debonair moment. I know that's like very neat, like very particular. I want them all to go to a fun little ball. I want them all to have like a really nice high society moment.
That's fun.
Because I think that we talked about this when we were setting up, like if we do more of this, how it would be really cool for everybody to sort of have their own space and their own season.
Yeah.
Because this was season 0 to me of like
totally. This was the pilot season.
Right. This was establishing the team.
Yeah.
And I think in my dream world we get 4 seasons of 1 per each character.
Yep.
Season 0 plus 4 seasons, and then a final coalesce.
Bring it all home. Yeah, totally.
That would be like my dream. If I'm only being, guaranteed 1 more season, I'm probably just going to act as if I do have the rest of that because confidence is half the battle.
Totally.
So I would go like where we left off was leading into what could be Dallin's season. That's Miles's character. And he's from high society, and I would love to have everybody, because I think that all of these, a season that focuses on one person still should have room for everybody. You got to
spotlight everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even if we're doing Miles' big meta plot thing, like every one of those characters having to figure out how to be in high society, there's great times for everyone there.
Exactly. Yeah. Fucking Poopa specifically with all of his stupid, his
high society disguise. Let's
high
go.
Society disguise. I would love to see Tubbins in his he's the most managerial of all of them. I think he could succeed in high society, and maybe actually he does, and everybody's surprised about it. And or even honestly, the raunchiest character having a really
high society branded pussy juice.
Exactly. Yeah, she's like pussy martinis. I would love to see all of them in that space, and my goal, I guess, specifically would be to have them all grow to love each other more and experience life from each one of their perspectives in each season. I would love to, when you have a campaign and everybody comes in with silly joke characters like fucking Boo Boo the Clown and Jorgus Johnson,
your dirt eating guy from
exactly.
Earlier, yeah.
And then we all are playing and it's silly and it's whatever, but then by the end everybody is in real tears because they love these characters and they love what they've built.
Chungus, don't go.
Exactly. Yeah. That nothing is more beautiful for me than those moments. And I don't know why. It's a subversion of expectation, I guess, and it just gets me every time that this stupid found family that is even though it's silly, that's real. Real life is quirky and awkward and strange, and I think that that's why it's so beautiful for me to see all of these. It's so indicative of the natural human spirit to find love in these places and find beauty and the willingness to be there for each other come out in this story that everybody planned on just fucking goofing around in.
Yeah.
And that nothing like gets me more than that. So that's what I want to see happen here, is that it become real. Like we're all performing, and it's all, it's everybody's day job here to like come in and play these games. But it was really exciting for me that at the end of filming, like both Zach and Keith came up to me and were like, that was really fun. And it wasn't they're like, good job, MJ. You did great. Yeah. It was like, I had a good time doing this.
Yeah.
And that's amazing for me. That is like the one thing that drives me as a DM, is like making people feel things.
Yeah. So it sounds like your goal is to become a better DM in that way too.
Yeah. That's my personal goal for me. And my other goal is to force them to
just
like cry. I want all of them to sob.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. But I'm gonna do my goals. So
I wasn't sure. I was like, we were both here, and I was like, do I need to like wrap this out in a nice way?
No, you don't. I feel like my goals for season 2 of Die Guys are. My goals for season 3 of Die Guys are like that it happens so I can get paid again, because
you know what,
this is a fabulous day job. I love this fucking day job.
Yeah.
And I feel like I love this as a job, and I love supporting you, and like the thing that you were talking about, it feels so much like your show that I am like really happy to contribute to, but it's just not the show that I would be making, you know? It's so much not my thing, even as I've gotten a lot out of it. But I feel like I've developed a lot of goals around RPGs and actual play out of going through the process of making the show.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has been like experimenting with actual play, that I think actual play is really interesting, both in this very traditional format, but in other formats. And so part of that for me is like doing this series. So I'm accomplishing my goals by doing this series of like talking with you and hopefully talking with other people about how actual play gets made and different kinds of actual play and what else is out there, because I think that sort of survey of how people are making actual play is, I'm sure other people have done that, but like not in my corner of the internet, and I want to make it for my corner of the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm just sort of curious to document the process of going through all of that. I'm also really curious to make a version of actual play that is the kind that I'm really excited by. And I have actually started doing this. So I launched a Patreon for this show back in February. Nice. And the only thing initially behind the paywall has been like an essay, a memoir, a game recap. It is like equal parts all of those things. I modeled it after like a This American Lifestyle essay of like, I'm going to go in and like have the experience of playing this game, and then I'm going to come back and like talk about what happened and what it meant to me and like analyze the game and do like a review of the game kind of at the same time. And it's like this 20-minute piece, and it has made a lot of my friends cry. And like, that's very cool. I'm very proud of this thing. Like I think it's very cool. And is it actual play? No, because it's happening after the fact. It's not actual play. But is it related? It's definitely related to actual play. And I'm doing another project where I have a game that I've made where essentially like I do some journaling, and then I pass it off to you, and you do some journaling, and then you pass it off to Will, and then Will does some journaling, and then passes it back to me, and we like go around in a circle. And I've been playing this game with some friends, and we basically have a novella now, right? Because we're each like writing 1,000 words every time we do this.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to see what happens if we like make the audiobook of that novella. And is that actual play? Maybe. Maybe that is, because it is the like words of us playing, even if we're recording it. I don't know. Like, is that actual play? I don't know. Yeah. Is the Void 1680 AM stuff actual play that I was talking about earlier? Yeah, probably. Yeah. What is that though exactly? And I'm really curious to like push on the edges of what actual play is right now and sort of see what happens.
I like that. I'm I think it's so funny that you're here with me playing as basic a game as possible.
Yeah.
As you attempt to press on the fringes of what could even be considered a game.
I always think like learning and spending a lot of time with the most mainstream ass shit really helps you make the weirdest stuff.
I have never been called mainstream in my fucking life. How dare you?
The Try Guys are super mainstream.
Yeah, well, I'm not a Try Guy.
Yeah, but like you're making Try Guys
like
stuff.
the other girls, Sam. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? I can't believe I'm mainstream. I'm having a crisis.
Dungeons and Dragons went mainstream. I don't know what to tell you.
That's so fucking awful.
Yeah, but
I
it's
was
true.
around when it wasn't. Not to be like I was listening to this band first, but like I was playing Dungeons and Dragons when it was weird.
I was probably playing Dungeons and Dragons before you were born.
You're not that much older than me.
I know, but I started playing very young. Well, I think that's a great place to end. MJ, thanks so much for being on Dice Exploder.
Thank you very much for having me on Dice Exploder. I'm going to explode my dice. Ready? I did it. What did that roll?
I don't know. It's on the carpet, so it's a little messy.
It's cocked, so I'm going to call it an 18, not a 5.
An 18? All right. I feel like that's about how this episode went. 18 out of 5. It was a near thing, but,
Hell yeah.
we'll get there.